Yes, welcome. Hey, everybody, welcome to our session. Um, we were having some nostalgia right there as everyone was filing in. Sandra Wong, who's here today, is one of our guests. That was the last time I saw Sandra, I think. It might have been the last time, maybe 1997. We recorded that piece together. Never released. That was the 90s sound, everybody. The 90s sound when we were all into the fusion of things. The spirit of the 90s is with us today. We got three Generation X people on the screen right before you. We're the forgotten generation, huh? Everyone talks about the Zoomers and the Boomers and the Millennials. Whatever happened to the Generation X? You know, we were half in the world of pre-internet and half in the world of technology. Welcome again, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this conversation with and performances by two liberal arts college graduates who have shaped innovative careers. I am Gibb Schreffler from the music department at Pomona College. I'm here with Alex Meixner and Sandra Wong, both graduates in music from Ithaca College. I was a graduate from Ithaca College as well, and our president is a trustee on the board of Ithaca College, Gabby Starr. So, fun fact. They will trade stories from their unique journeys to becoming multi-instrumental recording artists, touring performers, educators, and cultural ambassadors. How about that? Throughout the event, they will trade tunes, sharing favorite pieces on the instruments through whose traditions they have made their mark on the American musical landscape. At least I think so. Our event is sponsored by the Pomona College Music Department, and it's made possible through a gift from Barbara Bernard Smith, who was a pioneering ethnomusicologist, class of 1942, music at Pomona graduate. She celebrated her 100th birthday this last year. Thank you, Barbara. We love you. Just to let you know what's going to happen today, we're not planning on having a long Q&A section. We'd rather hear more voices and hear the music. The guests will be back in certain classes of mine and to take us into a deep dive with these instruments. But if you do have some really burning questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and if we get to them, we may get to them. Right, I want to introduce our two guests with some boilerplate material and have them introduce themselves, not through their words at first, but through perhaps a favorite introductory piece that represents them. So first of all, we have Sandra Wong, who began studying classical violin at the age of 7. Many have probably had a similar experience. But by the end of college, Sandra had discovered fiddling in the Irish, old time, and bluegrass traditions, before also gravitating towards the Swedish keyed fiddle, Nyckelharpa. Her current livelihood of teaching, performing, recording, and collaborating with other musicians from diverse genres has led her to tour nationally and internationally and to record several albums, solo and collaboration. She's focused on connecting people and cultures through music, and she facilitates musical study trips to different countries. Lastly, a percentage of all of Sandra's recording and her concert proceeds support charitable organizations and especially projects working to create environmental sustainability. Welcome, Sandra. Great to have you.
Thank you, Gabe. It's so great to be here. And as per requested, I'll play some music for you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Our next guest is, and I hope you're applauding at home, please. We can't hear you, but we will imagine that you are. Our next guest is Alex Meixner. He's a nationally acclaimed musician, performer, band leader, educator, and a leading advocate of polka music. He was born into a multi-generational family of musicians hailing from Austria, and he began playing accordion on stage at the age of 6. Accordion before that, but on stage by the age of 6. Formally trained as well in classical, jazz, and ethnic music, Alex has cross-pollinated his versatile playing styles through pop music, funk, jazz, and polka. He's an ambassador for polka music, revitalizing interest coast to coast, resulting in sold-out shows, renewed cultural interest, and growing mainstream acceptance. He's a Grammy nominee who has performed, and he's won a Grammy as a participant on an album as well, who has performed on over 50 albums, probably much more than that by now. Alex's work can be heard in such media as Hormel pepperoni commercials and the Netflix film The Polka King, which I just watched last week. Right on. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to start off with a little song that is a Slovenian folk song, also performed by Austrian musicians on the diatonic button accordion. So a little song called Krebeni Cipfelini Cipfelausi, or Tony's Polka.
Yes. What better introduction can there be than those? We should always do this in the future as musicians when we introduce ourselves. Just let the music speak.
Play.
So we have probably some seniors watching. We probably have some juniors watching. They're thinking about, where do I go from here? And what kind of career might I end up in as a student in the liberal arts? Yeah, okay. There's I without telling my whole story, I was in this boat. I graduated with music from Ithaca College, and to be honest, the day after I graduated, I had no plan whatsoever. I didn't even know what grad school was. Being honest, I didn't know what grad school was the day I graduated from undergraduate in college. And the very next day, I said, I need to find a job, any job. I'm not going to eat food until I find a job. And not to scare anybody, but I was actually eating food that I found on the street if I had to until I found a job. And I immediately went into manual labor before I decided to become creative in my career. Hopefully you all are thinking about the future a little bit more than that. But there's so many paths. So I want to begin asking our guests, it doesn't have to be in order. You guys can go exchange back and forth about their college time, their undergrad college time. What kind of activities were they involved in that were notable? And especially if there was some maybe major turning point you remember. It might have happened in your senior year, your junior year, or right after graduation perhaps, that led you on what you see as the roots of the start of the path that you're on right now?
Wow.
Sandra, you first.
Okay. Uh, yeah, well, I feel for all of you juniors and seniors because I remember senior year, especially feeling the most uncertain of any point in my life. But I'm here to tell you it works out. And so a pivotal turning point for me was junior year, just like Gibb was talking about. I had been solely a classical musician, and from the time I was 7, I was going to be a concert violinist or small chamber music player, and that was my only focus. Um, practicing. And then I had dated someone who was playing fiddle, and I took a few lessons with his teacher and fell in love. And there was a very specific moment. I was in a jam session led by my fiddle teacher. And what happened was I looked over and there was an elderly man. He was in his late 60s and he was playing an Irish jig. And he had the worst technique I've seen, and his violin, his bow had maybe a third of a head of hair on it. And the classical perfectionist part of me was going, this is terrible. What is he doing? And he started to play, and there was so much joy in what he was doing that I burst into tears in this jam session. I was a little embarrassed. It just struck me. And from that moment on, there was a real shift in my value system around music. And we were kind of alluding to this when we were catching up and chatting before we started. Because up until that point, my focus was really on perfection of form and just excellence. And I think striving for excellence is wonderful, but excellence and perfection are two different things in my mind. And at that moment, it changed to really being about what am I contributing to my community through my music? And this man is playing a jig, and there's so much joy that he's making me cry because it's touching me so deeply. So that started really a 180-degree turn. It was very confusing. It was a little bit like going through a midlife crisis, but I was only in my 20s, and or not even in my 20s at that point. And I'm so happy I listened. And that is, if I were to say anything to all of you, it would be listen to that inspiration inside of yourselves, listen to what brings you joy and really makes your heart sing. Because every step of what I've experienced since then has been in response to something that's brought joy or touched my heart. And it's been a little bit like magic, like things just unfold in unexpected ways. And so that's an overarching lesson that I've learned, and I just support you guys in listening to what really has that fire and that joy for you. And just to summate, what ended up happening is I just started studying all these different folk music styles. I graduated, I received my diploma, and I went, I will never play a lick of classical music again. And that lasted for maybe 6 years, and now I have a different feeling about it. And I exist in both worlds very happily, and I'm very grateful for all my classical training, but I needed a little break. So that's a little bit of my story. Yeah.
Thanks, Sandra.
So it's really awesome to hear some of this stuff because I mean we all knew each other during our grad time, and at the same time we're all going through a different psychological and emotional and educational and maturation process that is uniquely our own. You know, myself, I grew up in the fourth generation of musicians in my family from Austria that had settled in eastern Pennsylvania. But I came to Ithaca from Orlando, Florida. And my father was a full-time professional musician at Walt Disney World Epcot Center in the German Pavilion, where we celebrate Oktoberfest 365 days a year. So I came from an uber commercialized sense of the music industry and at the same time had this folk element to everything that I was doing. And everything I was taught by trumpet was my college instrument. Everything I was taught was that this is illegitimate, and it was a means to entertain people and to make some money, because I was recording albums from the time I was in middle school with my dad, and I did my first solo album where I played all the instruments: accordions, bass, keyboards, trumpet, drums, all of this stuff, when I was a freshman and sophomore in high school. And so it was like, oh, I had to learn what was commercially acceptable to the polka audience in the United States. This is in the early 90s. This is actually selling cassettes. And then we graduated to CDs. Oh, wow. How all of that has changed in the last 30 years to now we don't even manufacture so much of what we do. It's streamed and downloaded and whatever. But my big thing was that when I was at school, I was like, I am going to be legitimate. I am working predominantly in the jazz idiom. I was studying classical trumpet, but I was doing a lot in the jazz land. And it was making sure I don't land on the fourth when I'm on a major chord, when I'm improvising, or Steve Brown's gonna get at me. Is my embouchure correct for Frank Campo's trumpet lessons? And am I playing with the right amount of vibrato or not vibrato for Grant Cooper? Whatever it is. I lived in a world where I didn't understand that I had something to offer that had legitimate nature because of that communication. All of these times I was touring with my dad's band and this and that, playing for thousands of people, hundreds or thousands of people. We played the closing weekend of the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996. And, it's just like we had such surreal experiences. And then it was like, turn it all off because of what's academically correct. And it's great that to have the opportunity to come talk to students and to perform for students, to know that, especially in this day and age, we are the sum of all of our educational parts, and that can be formal or informal, legit, illegit, wherever we go. I've learned more from some musicians that can't read a lick of music than I've learned in some of my formal places. At the same part, I don't want to denigrate any of my formal education, because I have learned so much from those teachers, things that I learned in trumpet lessons, and have affected the way that I approach the music that I play now. And that is, I think, the most important part to look at when we are in folk music idioms. Folk music is music of the folks, which means that it is in a constant state of evolution. Whenever I go to certain conferences and that kind of thing, and they're like, well, this is authentic Austrian folksmusik. I'm like, well, authentic from a certain time period, as the instruments evolve, as the audiences evolve, as our form of communication evolves. I mean, who would have thought even 20 years ago that we could sit here on a Zoom call and be here 3,000 miles apart from each other and able to talk and communicate and let you hear music? That's going to have a great effect. Some of the music that I play is more traditional of one nationality, but most of it has elements that have continued to evolve. As immigrants have stayed in the United States for multiple generations, they are exposed to different musical instruments that weren't in the native lands, and then they come together. We have different influences, whether those are jazz harmonies or rock rhythms, or it's just fascinating. So whether you're looking to continue on with a career in music, or you are using music as a launching pad to where you're going to be creative, whether that's writing computer programs, creative lawyers are some of the most creative people I know because they have to find ways to take the law that exists on the books and then see how that is to be interpreted, you know, and with each generation, these things continue. And getting a full-rounded liberal arts education is probably one of the things I'm most thankful for. By going to Ithaca, I got a full music education and at the same time took other classes that helped find a way that I found a legitimacy in my illegitimateness.
Great. The last point you made, Alex, reminds me of the experience I had looking for work after college at first, and actually finding, to my surprise, that even if they weren't music jobs per se, I told employers that my degree was in music, and they had experience with music graduates, and some of them recognized like some of the different types of competencies that music, musicians have, like kind of the ability to do what we're doing right now, to be like in good time with each other and have a kind of a good presentation, and know when the clock is ticking, and have our bodies a certain way that is just situated with situational awareness and all these sorts of things, the responsibility that comes with playing in an ensemble and having to be on time and be there for your bandmates and all that sort of thing. So people who gained that idea thought of me as a great employee in that sort of way. So studying music doesn't even necessarily have to lead as well to performing, for instance, right? But so many other things. I want to just so with that in mind, since we are good with improvisation, I didn't prepare you all for this, the guests. At this point, would it be all right to ask you guys to play another tune?
Absolutely.
And would the tune, I don't know if the tune would relate to what we just did or not, but it doesn't have to. Let's just go for it.
Okay. Should I go or do you?
Yeah, why don't you go first this time, Alex?
Sure.
So I'm going to play a little tune that my father actually composed. And this is a waltz. And this instrument here is used in a lot of different kinds of traditional Austrian and Slovenian music, but it's diatonic in nature, which means it only plays in the keys. This one plays in the key of G, C, F, and B flat. And each button is different going in and out. So I'll get a few music nerd things in there. So we've got the 1 chord and then the 5 chord. So going in, you've got 1, 5 going out. And so this is a song that has some funky little chords in it. At the same time, it retains a folk melody and a folk style melody. So a little song that my father composed for my little sister, the Katrina Bowl. So let me enable original sound.
Beautiful. Love it.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Thank you.
Oh, I love it. So that sparks a thought to play something that I wasn't planning on doing at this moment, but I'll play it because it also has to do with family and all of that. And it's so fun to hear you play, Alex. Alex and I did a musical in college. Do you remember? It was like
Oh
called something
yes,
like Strider or something.
yes, with Dr. Pelto and Brian LaFleur.
Yes.
I should have done that. I had seen a picture that I had in one of my boxes of the four of us in our Russian costumes and everything. I will have to take that, and I have to scan that and send it over to
That would
everybody.
be awesome. Yes, we would. So Alex was playing accordion and I was playing fiddle, and we were in the costumes, and I had to go down on stage and dance at some point while I was playing. It was very exciting. But
That was such a fun time, and
it really was.
yeah, it was just awesome.
Yeah. So so we are having a reunion here, folks. So it's really great. And so this is a Nyckelharpa for some of you who may not know. And I do believe my student Marcus, who is now at Pomona, is watching, and he also has a Nyckelharpa. So you have a Nyckelharpa among your student body. When you guys can all be back together again. Nyckelharpa makes a great instrument as part of a band. And a lot of people will come up and they don't know what it is. And they're like, it sounds kind of like the cross between a viola and an accordion. And I don't know where that sound reference comes, but maybe it's because of the sustain and the reverb. I know, if you play accordion or you play viola, it's but maybe not as close. But yeah, so this instrument dates back to the 1100s. From Sweden, and it has 16 strings. I have 12 sympathetic strings and 4 main playing strings. And the strings, it's not tuned like any other instrument that I know of. The top string is an A, then I have C, G, C. And the bottom string is just a drone. So I don't have any keys connected with this bottom string. So the first tune I played, it was like, play something that like really feels like you. And that, I'm starting by playing you tunes that I've written. And that one was called Santa Fe Slang Polska. I wrote it when I was living in Santa Fe. And it just, you know, we're talking about all these different genres of music and moving them forward. And I come from a Chinese, Eastern European, Jewish background. And somehow I have fallen in love with Swedish music and Middle Eastern music and Irish music. And so I joke that, you know, here I have this Chinese Jewish girl playing the Swedish Nyckelharpa, and I'm going to play shortened versions of 3 pieces that I've written. The first is called Remembrance, and I dedicate it to my grandparents, who are very, very supportive of my music. The second one, I am going to do a very truncated version. It's some of these pieces have a lot of chordal movement that without that, it does better to do a short version, but it's called A Time for Peace. And that's really a prayer that we find that as humans, we're so creative and we have so much intellect. And my prayer is that we learn to use it constructively, because I think we can create an amazing world if we do that. And the last one, and this is when Alex said a waltz for his dad wrote a waltz for his sister. This is a waltz that I wrote for 2 friends when they got married, Dominic Leslie and Phoebe Hunt. So.
Sandra, I was so moved that forgot to do one of my duties. I'm supposed to type in closed captioning little musical note symbols whenever music happens. And I found myself lost, and then I remembered. So thank you for transforming my conscience with that. Hey, let's move on to a little later in our lives. We're after college now, and I want to think about how we found our feet, how we found our footing, how we kind of, started making a living for ourselves. That sort of nuts and bolts thing. I myself was set on playing on a cruise ship, and I worked various channels and various connections I had to finally get to play jazz on a cruise ship. I bought a new instrument. I, practiced for months, kept waiting for the call. You have to wait for a call at a specific time of when they have a slot and they need you on the ship. And got all geared up and flew down to Florida and sailed out of Cape Canaveral area. And then after I was on the ship for 1 week, I hated it. I said, I don't want to do this. I want to be back on the land doing other stuff that I'm into. At the time, I was into Indian film music. I was getting into Indian music. And I said, I'd rather be home watching my Indian film music, videos than, than doing all this stuff I had put work into to play jazz on the cruise ship. And all the investment I had made on the new instruments and amplifiers I'd bought and the plane ticket and all that sort of stuff became my first debt of my adult life that actually stayed on a credit card with me until just recently I finally paid off the whole credit card. So that was my moment when I kind of said, I am a musician. I have been a musician. It has been my identity. But shortly after, I decided I wanted to combine my music with scholarship and go into graduate studies and so on and so forth. So how about you guys? Was there any kind of little stumbles along the way in those years following graduation where you had some aha moment and you followed that instinct?
I think everything has been a stumble in some sort of way. But that might also have to do with the fact that, I considered a lot of my gigs, when people asked me what my profession was up to a few years ago, especially, I'd be like, well, I'm an alcohol salesman and I sell alcohol by playing the accordion with a polka band. Because one of our songs, if you drink, you're gonna die. If you don't drink, you're gonna die. So why die thirsty? Why die thirsty? Why die thirsty? Let's have a drink. Why die thirsty? Why die thirsty? Why die thirsty? Let's all have a drink. Okay. So I think I'm lucky to have been able. I have actually never ever held a job outside of the field of music. When I was seventh grade, I played drums 2 nights a week with my dad at the Bavarian Schnitzel House on International Drive in Orlando, Florida. And I'd be going dinga 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 and playing that and learning. Oh, the people want to dance to a cha cha. Dun 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 dun, dun. And I was able to follow all this stuff. And then so while I was in school, finding ways to start playing gigs at the ABC Cafe and then College Town Bagels or whatever it was. And then to playing the musicals at Cornell, like we did that. And then after school, it was just like things sort of fell into each other. You know, I was teaching trumpet lessons at settlement music schools in Philadelphia, and then started at a music and arts center. And then I fell into a job at a community music school where I was coordinating a music program for at-risk Hispanic students from a charter school. And then gigs just sort of fell into each other. And so I think the most important thing is figuring out that don't say no to an opportunity. And when you are ill qualified for that opportunity, after you get the job, then study like crazy so you can figure out. And in some way or another, I'm able to pull stuff from all these different experiences in my life. I'd say the closest job I had outside of music was I was the executive director of a chamber orchestra in Pennsylvania. And so I was the guy responsible for writing grants, for doing lots of shaking hands and kissing babies to get money, and then to get people into the seats. And I'd say the biggest stumbling block was walking in the first day where I'm now an executive director of a nonprofit organization, and our treasurer walks in and she's like, okay, here's your QuickBooks report. And I'm like, what language is this? And there's numbers all over this. And she goes, okay, well, here's all the bad news. We owe this money, we owe this money, we owe this money. I mean, and I'm like, oh, we're like $50,000 in debt here, and then starting to figure out that was a huge turning point for me in understanding what makes everything go around. We are here to make music, to entertain people, to enlighten people, to communicate with our audiences. And then we have to figure out, oh, now where are the funds going to come to allow us to do this? And then I started figuring out some of that stuff, and it was an important moment. It is what has told me it's okay to do commercial stuff. It is okay to put a drum on my back and have a trumpet and accordion and sell Hormel pepperoni on television. It gave me, it built an audience that helped me to get more of my other music out. A guy that I met when I was still a student at Ithaca is Jan Levon. And Jan ended up going to prison for running a Ponzi scheme, but his life story is what ended up being the Polka King movie. And I got called to be the accordion player with Jack Black. It's everything is going to come together from it. So just don't close doors. Always just open new ones and go for it. So I don't know how discombobulated all of that really was, but yeah, I think I answered the question sort of.
Crystal clear.
I followed all of it. And I have to agree. And I think there's a balance. Like there is a saying, you can die from exposure. So, have your intuition and your wisdom about you, but it's so true. Things come in and you go, I don't know how to do that. And if it's something you're interested in and is aligned with the musical path or life path you want to do, say yes. And as a musician, man, I've had months where you barely have time to stop to eat, and financially it's just incredible, or years where it's just incredible, and then other years like this last one as a musician where we're all feeling it, you know. I think that the key is that most of us really love what we're doing. And so whether it's financially rockin' or financially challenging, I think most of us feel a certain happiness going through all of it and a certain satisfaction. So that's pretty key. To come back to how after college, I remember, as I said, I graduated with this classical performance degree, didn't want to do anything classical performance related, was in love with folk music, had no idea how to function in the folk music world from a business perspective. So I moved out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, was teaching in a Montessori classroom, and that lasted for about 6 months. I entered the Santa Fe Bluegrass Fiddle Contest. They had an old time contest, a bluegrass contest, and an odd instrument contest. I won all three, and after I packed up my instruments and I was walking out to my car in the parking lot, and this girl runs up and she goes, "You have to stop. My mom needs to talk to you." And she goes, she was the head of the Suzuki Institute in Santa Fe, and she goes, "One of our teachers just got hired to play in the Mexico Symphony. We have an entire studio of students. We need a teacher. Will you do it?" And I went, and I actually was like, I need to think about this, because it's this balance between performing and teaching and all of this. And I went home and I thought on it, and I woke up and there was a double rainbow across the whole valley where I was living. And I went, okay. And so I called and I said yes. And before I knew it, I was leaving the Montessori teaching job, which was working with 32 to 5-year-olds every day, which was not quite my cup of tea. It had moments of fun, but much prefer working one-on-one with students or in group settings and performing. And within a very short period of time, between teaching and gigging, was working as a full-time musician. And that has continued throughout the recession, throughout everything. And as I said, you know, I think there's something about just the humility of showing up, whether you're sharing the stage with these enormous names and you're like, how did I end up here? Or you're playing for a lovely group of seniors at a nursing home that really, it's their nourishment when you're there, you know, and half of them can't hear, some of them are asleep, but it's a gift to them, you know. So I've had a mix of both throughout all these years, and I'm just very grateful. And there was an important component that I was going to share. Oh, so like Alex was saying, you know, I get calls for all sorts of stuff. My love is to do concerts, and of course concerts in really nice concert halls with really good audiences and really good pay. Who wouldn't want that? But sometimes what I'm being called to do is to be a violinist with DJ. And so, you know, that's not anything I ever thought I would be doing, is playing violin parts, you know, and improvising over pop tunes and all sorts of stuff. And I wouldn't want to make an everyday career out of it. But I tell you what, everything that I do like that, I learned something about music, I learned something about my instrument, and I learned something about technology and working with other people. So it all starts to come together. So since college, it's been an ever-evolving roller coaster ride that the constant is just how I'm relating to it. And I think as self-employed people, that's a skill we have to learn if we're going to stay self-employed. So
Well, and to build on that, you know, we're not bored, you know, and even in this time when, like, I lost over 100 gigs last calendar year. I saw probably 80% of my income go up in smoke. And, you know, it's a time when it made me take a step back, spend more time at home than I've ever spent in my life. And it has allowed me to practice and explore music that I've been meaning to do I mean, there's books that I acquired when I was in college that never were opened. That is like, oh, I'm gonna work on this eventually. Well, eventually is now, and it is so exciting that I have these opportunities. I had stopped teaching when I moved to Florida with my now ex-wife 11 years ago. That was the end of my normal teaching land because I was on the road performing so much. And this has been a sign to get back. I started a Patreon page, and the thing, so where people can support my music by at different levels. They can get the downloads of what I'm recording, this and that. But the education side of that is what has really grown. I have students in all throughout the United States, in Canada, in the Netherlands, and it's been really fulfilling to get that opportunity to help other people communicate through music, especially in this time. And their various goals of music are helping me to understand why it's important for what we're doing, and that's a good thing. So, should we play again?
Yes, yes. I was going to just say, to add a couple cliches to what you all just said so beautifully, I'm going to speak in cliches. Expect the unexpected. But also, everything's going to be okay. So yeah, if you guys would, we'd love to hear another tune from each of you, please.
Okay, so I put the piano accordion on, the more conventional instrument now, and I'm going to do a little medley of Hungarian music. And these are csaradashes. And a csaradas is the national dance of Hungary, okay? And there is one csaradas that is known throughout the world. It is a virtuoso song on every instrument. I've heard tuba players, violinists, of course, and of course the most famous csaradas is written by an Italian, not a Hungarian, Monti's csaradas. But I'm not going to play that one because I figured that I'm going to do something more traditional. Where my family comes from in Austria, is an area called Burgenland, which was part of Hungary for a while. And then Hungarians got tired of supporting our poor butts. And so they gave it to the Austrians. And then they kept going back and forth. So when my great-grandfather came over the first time, he was Hungarian from Pomona. Then he went back to Hungary, Austria, whatever you want to call it, to get the rest of the family. And he came back, he was Austrian. But we were ethnic Austrians. But I'm going to play a little medley of Ritka Busha and Fercolo Csardas. So hope you enjoy this.
Mind blowing.
Smoking. That's awesome. Alex, it's so funny because here you play these polkas. I'm not going to play a polska next on the fiddle, but a lot of the Swedish music, they are polskas, and basically they somehow thought it was very like the polka, but it's not at all. Like there's this connection between polskas and polkas, and it makes no sense. But yeah, anyways, listening to you, it's super fun.
There's so many different connections between these cultures. The accordion itself, from Italy and Austria to Irish tradition, to the Mexican traditions, to the South American traditions, and there's bridges through all of that. And there's those distinct qualities. And I believe it's one of the things that's awesome because we live in a country of immigrants where all of these cultures have converged here, looking to create a better life, but also to meld with each other, So my dad would describe it as the American goulash, or stew or jambalaya. Each ingredient tastes good on its own, but then we bring it here and we mix it all together and it becomes its own thing. And
absolutely.
It's pretty awesome quality.
It is pretty awesome. And it's interesting because I had this experience in Sweden any number of times where masters would say, Sandra, we have the tradition, like study it and take what you resonate with, but do something new with it. Because it's growing beyond the borders of that. I thought I would play a medley as well of some Celtic tunes in honor of the piece that you heard at the very beginning, which it was so fun to hear that as a recording of my playing of Gibb's piece from a number of years ago. But there's a couple tunes in here which are Cape Breton tunes. So there's Irish tunes and Cape Breton tunes. And then the last tune is original by Natalie McMaster called Mother Nature. But so much of the Scottish music is actually, Cape Breton music is actually closer to the original roots of Scottish music, because when it moved to Cape Breton, when the Scots emigrated to Cape Breton, they wanted to hold on to their roots. So that has been an enclave of more traditional Scottish music than you find in Scotland, because in Scotland it continues to evolve, and Cape Breton continues to evolve, but it is closer to the roots. So here's a Celtic medley for fun. And last thought about all this, Alex was talking about our role as musicians in terms of communication, in terms of I forget all the wonderful words that you were using in terms of what our purpose is. And I would also say, especially in this time that we've all gone through, a really difficult year, we're also here to uplift. And man, music can do that like nothing else can, can't it? It's pretty awesome. So starts out with a jig called Mouse in the Mug. I just love the name of it.
That was breathtaking. That's got to be one of the most exciting sets of tunes put together I've ever heard for.
Fun stuff, I tell ya.
So I hope the audience is realizing that they're viewing the top fiddle and and accordion players in our whole country. We got you guys for cheap because of the alumni connection, but they got superstars in front of them right now.
Well, hopefully, once we get past all of this COVID time, we all get to converge on California and do this live and in person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that would be so fun.
I'm finding all your key centers, and I'm like, I want to start working. But I know that with the Zoom lag that we get, it's going to throw everything off. So,
right.
I mean, so we are charging Gibb with making sure we get a California reunion.
That's right.
Let's do it.
That would be so fun.
Hey, so we're all musicians here, so our musician brains are working, and we're thinking about time and timing. And I'm looking at a clock, and we've got just about 5 minutes. Oh my gosh, only 5 minutes left, and we're thinking like, how as good musicians and presenters can we wrap this up? And my suggestion is we end a bit like we started. Well, first of all, I should end by thanking from the bottom of my heart Sandra Wong and Alex Meixner for their gracious donation of time and sharing themselves with us, and for our audience for staying with us this long. Thank you so much. And I think we could end with more music, but this is the musician's challenging task, right? 5 minutes. Can we find it in our hearts to abbreviate ourselves to just give a taste? We hate to do that. We hate to do that, but on the other hand, we know how to do it. You wanna try the challenge? We'll kind of as we did our intro, we'll do our outro by just saying goodbye and a goodbye bit of tune.
Okay, so I as I have the accordion on here, I think I have about a 2.5 minute polka to play. This is a song written by the late great Johnny Pecan, who was a Cleveland, Slovenian polka artist. I just want to set it up in that he came of age in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So you're going to start hearing some jazz-ish chords thrown in there. And I want to play this because it's one of my favorite polkas. And one of my friends who actually repairs my accordions and is a brilliant accordionist himself, Mr. Brian O'Boyle, him and his wife had a baby daughter on Monday, and her name is Ava. So this is the Ava polka. So.
Close it out. I haven't played anything traditional on this instrument, so I'm going to play you a short traditional piece called Bugnan, and let it be an introduction. in March, Gibb and I are going to do a class specifically about the Nyckelharpa, and you'll get to hear a lot more of the traditional music at that point. So this is Bugnan.
Perfectly timed. Time is the master, and the musicians are the master of time. Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to let everyone go and have their dinner or have their bed or wherever we're doing right now. Maybe some are having their breakfast. Grateful for those who are about to eat their breakfast and who woke up to see us today. Grateful especially to our guests, Sandra Wong, Alex Meixner, SandraWongMusic.com, AlexMeixner.com. Please check them out. There's hundreds of videos I want to say of these folks out there on the YouTubes and all those other sorts of things. And we'll be happy to welcome them back in our classes shortly. Thank you guys so much.